Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars and welcome to another of my top 10 lists. Now, fairly recently on the channel I put up a classic film review for the film Die Hard, the classic 1980s Bruce Willis action film, and I mentioned in that review that I could not believe how many films since Die Hard have copied that formula, the action film formula. It really took me back at how many there are actually out there that have copied the formula of Die Hard, and the film itself has created its own subgenre in the genre of action films. So this top 10 list focuses on the top 10 action films that I think fairly successfully copied the formula of Die Hard in some way or other. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Some of these were pretty big hits, some of them weren't big hits, and some of them were pretty forgettable. So I hope you enjoy it. So, as always, there are some that don't quite make the list, and the two that I have picked out that I think copied the Die Hard formula that just didn't crack my top 10. The first one is the Dwayne Johnson film Skyscraper. Now, this one copied the formula so closely they even did a mock-up poster that looked very similar to the Die Hard one. It's a watchable film, but it's they try and make him vulnerable by giving him like a fake leg and things like that. It just wasn't that good, if I'm honest, but it was certainly watchable. And Passenger 57 with Wesley Snipes, again copied the formula. This time it was on a plane. It's just not one of my favourite action films. I wasn't overly keen on it personally. But coming in at number 10, it might surprise some people this, it's a film called Final Score, and it stars Dave Bautista and Pierce Brosnan. Now this came out a couple of years ago and I did review it on the channel, I'm sure I did. And this one is set in England, and this one is in a football stadium, and I'm trying to think, I think it might be West Ham's football stadium, and these terrorists try and I think they target this IRA guy who is played by Pierce Brosnan, something like that from what I remember. It's not an overly memorable plot, but it's a lot of fun is this film with Dave Bautista, who actually plays a pretty compelling lead in this, and there's loads of action and loads of fun. Now the next one is also a sporting event, and this is Sudden Death, the Jean-Claude Van Damme take on the Die Hard genre, and this was released in 1995. It had Powers Booth, who played like the bad guy in this one, and it was based in a hockey ring, if I remember rightly. And this came out probably at the height of Van Damme's fame. This was in the midst of him doing his Universal Soldiers and his Time Cop type movies, and so it was a reasonably successful film, this, but it's fairly forgettable. But it's actually not too bad, because he doesn't do it's one of those films where it's not just all about his martial arts and he beats everybody up. He plays quite a vulnerable guy in this film, so it's certainly watchable. Coming in at number 8 is Dread. What an underrated film this is, I think, by many, and this copies the Die Hard formula. Dread and his partner go into this huge block of flats, if you like, in Megacity, and it all gets locked down, and then they've got to kind of fight for survival as it's full of these drug criminals in there, these drug gangs, and he's got to kind of stay alive, take them out one at a time in only the way that Dredd can. The only real difference here is that, if you like, he's not an ordinary guy. It's Judge Dredd, for goodness sake. You know he's badass from the start, but it does copy the formula pretty successfully, I think, this film. Coming in at number 7 is Con Air, Die Hard on a Plane. Nick Cage, John Malkovich, John Cusack. Great cast is this, and it's a load of fun is this film. This was at that stage in Nick Cage's career where he was absolutely hot property in Hollywood for action films. Con Air, The Rock, Face Off, he was untouchable at the time. And this one, like I say, it's Die Hard on a plane. It's these criminals on a plane, and Nick Cage has kind of got to try and stay alive and make sure that the bad guys don't get away with what they're trying to do. It's a lot of fun is this film. It's like a cartoon, but it's great fun. Number 6, Executive Decision. I really like this film. It's one of my favourite Kurt Russell films, and essentially it's like Die Hard on a plane again, but there's more players in this film. Essentially Kurt Russell plays like an analyst. He's not an action guy, and he gets stuck on this jumbo jet with a couple of other soldiers who survive, and they've got to try and track down this terrorist on this plane, played by David Suchet, who is threatening to like detonate bombs and all this kind of stuff, and he's taking this plane hostage. It also has Steven Seagal in it, even though it's quite brief, but it's a really good film, and it's a really good take on the Die Hard formula, especially with the vulnerable lead. Coming at number 5, another Nick Cage film, The Rock. Great cast: Sean Connery, Nick Cage, Ed Harris. This is essentially Die Hard on Alcatraz, when Nick Cage and Sean Connery have to try get to Alcatraz, break into Alcatraz, and stop Ed Harris's group of mercenaries from holding San Francisco hostage. So they've got to try and defuse all these bombs all around Alcatraz. So essentially it's Die Hard on an island on Alcatraz. Really great film, loads and loads of fun. I do want to get around to doing a classic film review for this at one point, because it's one of my favourite Nick Cage films, but it definitely follows the Die Hard formula, this one. Number 4, Olympus Has Fallen. I've only just watched this quite recently, and I have reviewed it, and I've reviewed all the Fallen films. I did a triple film review. I think they're really good films. I wished I'd have certainly watched them earlier, certainly the first 2. Yeah, the third one's quite recent, I know. But this is basically Die Hard in the White House. Gerard Butler plays ex-Secret Service agent, and the White House is taken hostage by these terrorists from North Korea, I think it is. So he's got to basically get himself into the White House, stay alive, and rescue the President of the United States, which is a little bit of a theme, as we will see with our next entry, I believe. Coming in at number 3 is Air Force One, another Die Hard on a plane formula, with Harrison Ford, Gary Oldman, so we have a great cast on board here. Harrison Ford plays the President of the United States. Air Force One is taken over by terrorists, and he's got to basically stay alive and fight back against these terrorists on Air Force One, and make sure that he stops their devious plans. Great action film this. Harrison Ford always plays great vulnerable heroes. He's done it throughout his whole career, and he does it really successfully here. This was a really big hit at the time. Followed the formula really well, and it's a highly entertaining film. Coming in at number 2 is Cliffhanger, Stallone's version of Die Hard. This is Die Hard on a cliff, and this was a really clever move, I think, by Stallone, this film, because his career was pretty much failing at this point, and he came back with this film, and he kind of turned himself into a vulnerable hero here. Which is not easy to do when you've done films like Cobra and Rambo and all this kind of stuff, but he just plays a regular guy in this film. He's nobody special, but he's got to kind of try and stop these terrorist bad guys from getting away with their devious plan on this cliff. It's a really fun, entertaining film, definitely one of Stallone's best. I just did a top 10 list recently of his, and it was in there. Number 1 for me, I think the most successful copy of the Die Hard clone, and my favourite, is Under Siege. It's arguably my favourite Steven Seagal film. It was his biggest hit, and it's just a fantastic film. Yes, you could argue he doesn't play the vulnerable hero here. He's almost invincible with his martial arts skills and Aikido skills here, but he doesn't. You don't think that initially, because he starts off as the cook on this ship. And they just don't expect him to be there. Tommy Lee Jones and Gary Busey and all the other bad guys, and he fights back and takes no prisoners, and it's a really brilliant action film, and it's my favourite, which is why it's number 1. So there we go, guys. That is my top 10 favourite Die Hard clones. A really fun list to do. I couldn't believe how many films are out there that do copy this formula. You could even argue that Die Hard 2 copied the same formula from Die Hard 1, or Under Siege 2 again copied the Die Hard formula, but I tried to keep it to one film per franchise, and I didn't necessarily want to put Die Hard 2 in there because they're copying Die Hard, if you like, if that makes any sense. So a really fun list. Let me know if there's any in the comments that I have missed that you think deserve to make it into this top 10 list, and also let me know if there's any top 10 lists you'd be interested to see in the future. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and of course I'll see you back for more reviews on Screen Stars very soon.